President Donald Trump has applied intense pressure on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to accept key elements of a peace framework, raising fears in Kyiv that failure to compromise could jeopardize critical American support and leave Ukraine facing severe territorial and security losses. As of late January 2026, negotiations have reached a critical juncture amid ongoing Russian attacks, extreme winter conditions, and trilateral talks that show tentative progress but remain far from resolution. The conflict, now approaching its fourth year since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, shifted markedly after Trump's inauguration in January 2025. The administration has prioritized a rapid negotiated settlement, engaging directly with both Kyiv and Moscow through envoys like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Earlier proposals, including a reported 28-point plan discussed in late 2025, demanded significant Ukrainian concessions on territory, military limits, and NATO aspirations. Elements Zelenskyy described as forcing a stark choice between dignity and losing a major ally. By January 2026, the focus narrowed. Zelenskyy met Trump in Davos on January 22nd during the World Economic Forum, where discussions centered on security guarantees and economic recovery incentives, including potential air defense systems. Zelenskyy described the meeting positively, noting progress on U.S. commitments. A breakthrough appeared imminent when Zelenskyy announced on January 25th, 26 in Vilnius, Lithuania, that a bilateral U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees document was 100% ready for signing. He emphasized that these assurances, primarily from the United States, were vital, as European pledges alone could not provide sufficient long-term deterrence. The document, once finalized on date and location, would require ratification by the U.S. Congress and Ukraine's parliament. Simultaneously, the first trilateral talks involving U.S., Ukrainian, and Russian delegations took place in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, on January 23rd and 24th, the first such direct format since the invasion began. Chaired with UAE facilitation, the sessions included technical-level discussions on ending the war, with Zelenskyy calling them constructive. Military officers compiled issue lists for follow-up, and U.S. envoy Witkoff described a lot of progress and optimism for continuation. No major agreements emerged, but parties scheduled resumption on February 1st in Abu Dhabi. Territorial issues, especially control over Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbas, remain central. U.S. proposals reportedly push for resolutions involving parts of these oblasts in exchange for guarantees, though Ukraine insists on no unilateral concessions without ironclad international backing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio highlighted the Donetsk question as a key remaining hurdle. Humanitarian conditions deteriorated sharply amid brutal winter weather, with Russian strikes targeting energy infrastructure, leaving millions without power or heat in sub-zero temperatures. In response, Trump announced on January 29th that he had personally requested Putin to halt attacks on Kyiv and other cities for 1 week due to the extreme cold, claiming Putin agreed as a humanitarian gesture. Zelenskyy welcomed the initiative, expressing hope for implementation to protect civilians, and thanked the U.S. for efforts to stop energy facility strikes. Moscow has not publicly confirmed the pause, and ongoing bombardments have cast doubt on immediate compliance. This U.S. pressure reflects Trump's strategy to broker peace swiftly, often framing Ukrainian flexibility as essential while engaging Putin directly. Zelenskyy has resisted ceding territory, stressing sovereignty and the need for proven deterrence through sustained sanctions and aid. Europe, wary of being sidelined, has called for greater pressure on Russia, with EU officials criticizing Moscow's seriousness in talks. As January 2026 closes, diplomacy intensifies with near-finalized U.S. guarantees and upcoming Abu Dhabi sessions, yet deep divisions persist over territory, guarantees, and Russia's commitment. The humanitarian toll mounts, underscoring the urgency amid frozen fronts and civilian suffering. Stakeholder reactions highlight the high stakes and divergent priorities. Zelenskyy has praised elements like advancing security guarantees and the potential attack pause, thanking Trump for humanitarian steps while urging continued leverage on Russia via sanctions and military aid. He has advocated for European action coalitions and insisted guarantees must be credible and U.S.-centric. U.S. officials, including Witkoff, have portrayed trilateral talks as productive, with plans for February 1st resumption signaling momentum. Trump has highlighted his direct Putin contacts and the cold weather pause as evidence of progress. Rubio has noted potential consensus on limited European roles backed by U.S. support, though acknowledging persistent challenges. Russia remains guarded, rejecting security arrangements seen as threats and reiterating demands tied to its original war aims, including territorial recognition and limits on Ukraine's military posture. Kremlin statements describe talks as constructive in tone, but maintain firm positions against Western guarantees. Impacts span multiple domains. Politically in Ukraine, U.S. pressure complicates Zelenskyy's position, where public sentiment strongly opposes territorial concessions. Securing guarantees could strengthen Kyiv's leverage, but perceived one-sided compromises risk domestic backlash. Economically, destroyed infrastructure exacerbates winter crises. A viable peace could enable reconstruction, but fragile terms might invite future instability. Socially, civilians endure blackouts, displacement, and hardship from energy attacks. A short-term pause, if honored, provides relief, but does not resolve vulnerabilities. Looking ahead, outcomes hinge on upcoming negotiations. A framework with territorial adjustments, possibly in Donbas, tied to robust U.S.-led guarantees, potentially resembling defense commitments. This could halt fighting, but demand Ukraine sustain a strong military with allied backing. Prolonged impasse if Russia dismisses guarantees or Ukraine deems concessions unacceptable. Europe could then escalate independent support and sanctions. Incremental steps, beginning with humanitarian pauses, energy strike halts, and gradual de-escalation toward comprehensive talks. Zelenskyy has stressed that guarantees require demonstration through ongoing pressure on Moscow. The U.S. wields key tools via aid, sanctions, and diplomacy, while Europe must enhance defense autonomy. In conclusion, late January 2026 stands as a decisive moment. Diplomacy accelerates with concrete advances in security documents and trilateral formats, yet core disputes over territory and reliable deterrence endure. Sustainable peace necessitates balanced compromises in a war that has inflicted profound suffering, with the February talks likely determining if current momentum yields resolution or renewed deadlock. Reactions reflect the high stakes and diverging priorities. In Ukraine, Zelenskyy praised progress on security guarantees and the potential pause, thanking Trump for humanitarian efforts while urging sustained pressure on Russia through sanctions and aid. He advocated European action coalitions and stressed guarantees must be credible and U.S.-led. Domestically, public sentiment remains firmly against territorial concessions, viewing them as undermining sovereignty after years of resistance. U.S. officials portrayed Abu Dhabi talks positively, with Witkoff highlighting momentum and plans for resumption potentially adjusted. Trump emphasized direct Putin contacts and the cold weather pause as evidence of influence. Rubio noted possible consensus on limited European troop roles with U.S. backing, but acknowledged challenges, especially Donetsk. Russia remained guarded, rejecting arrangements seen as threats and reiterating demands for territorial recognition and military limits. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov clarified territory was not the sole issue, while spokesman Dmitry Peskov described talks as constructive but firm on positions. Moscow invited Zelenskyy to Moscow, rejected, and showed no enthusiasm for broad energy ceasefires without concessions. Impacts are profound across domains. Politically, U.S. linkage of guarantees to a deal complicates Zelenskyy's position. Surveys show strong opposition to ceding Donbas, risking backlash if perceived as one-sided. Securing U.S. assurances could enhance leverage and post-war stability, but weak terms might encourage future aggression. Economically, destroyed infrastructure, especially energy grids, exacerbates winter crises, with blackouts affecting heating, water, and daily life. A durable peace could unlock massive reconstruction, potentially billions in aid, but fragile agreements risk instability or renewed conflict disrupting recovery. Socially, civilians face displacement, hardship, and trauma from prolonged fighting and attacks. Short-term pauses offer relief, preventing further energy strikes during sub-zero temperatures, but do not address root vulnerabilities like infrastructure repair or safe return for millions displaced. For the future, outcomes depend on upcoming negotiations, e.g., February Abu Dhabi round, possibly delayed. A comprehensive framework with territorial adjustments, e.g., Donbas compromises like demilitarized special economic zones, tied to robust U.S.-led guarantees, potentially resembling defense pacts with intelligence, monitoring, and European support. This could end active combat, but require Ukraine to maintain a strong army and accept NATO alternatives. Continued stalemate if Russia rejects guarantees or Ukraine views concessions as unacceptable. Europe might then intensify independent aid, sanctions, and defense spending to pressure Moscow. Incremental de-escalation, humanitarian energy pauses expanding into phased ceasefires, Zaporizhia oversight agreements, and gradual talks on broader issues. Zelenskyy emphasized guarantees must be demonstrated through ongoing leverage on Russia. The U.S. holds key tools, aid, sanctions, diplomacy, while Europe must build autonomy. Technical work remains on finer details like zone security and nuclear plant control. In conclusion, late January 2026 marks a pivotal, tense moment. Diplomacy has accelerated with concrete steps. 100% ready guarantees, trilateral formats, humanitarian gestures, yet core disputes over Donbas territory and reliable deterrence endure. Sustainable peace demands balanced compromises acceptable to all in a war inflicting profound human and material costs. The coming weeks, with resumed talks and potential signings, will determine if momentum leads to resolution or renewed deadlock amid winter's harsh grip.